Hey guys, I'm going to go over chapter 5 with you guys. Um, the ethical and legal implications of practice. So, this is our last chapter for Unit 2. You'll have some more assignments due that you'll have a little bit more time. I'm going to post this and then I just want you to do a little summary for do me about 4 sentences over kind of what we talked about today. I do have some different little slides in here that we usually do. When we are interactive, but I didn't take them out. So um, when we get back into this, maybe we can do that together. Okay, so this is ethical and legal implications of the practice. Usually I'll have, back to this, I was like draw our top 2 things that you already know about today's topic. So it's a pure deck thing. So we'll ignore that. Okay, so introduction, the force behind civil law is, you're going to, and it has a threefold, so there's 3 things. So you're going to state statutes, regulate individual conduct, state statutes and professional boards, regulate the practice of therapists at a set minimum standards for competent practice, as well as requirements for continuing education. The common law of civil liability for negligent and intentional acts imposes a duty to pay compensation to individuals who are injured. So the distinction is an illegal act that violates the standards of conduct that sets down for all citizens. So domestic assault, ethical misconduct usually relates to violations of professional and ethical norms established by the profession as a whole. So what is philosophical foundations of ethics? So you have ethics that has its origins in philosophy. So philosophy, and then it's separated to ethics. So ethics is ontology, metaphysics, epistemology, axology, logics, aesthetics, and then so ethics really is what's saying, okay, primarily concerned with the question, how should we act? So you need to say, how should we act? And then ethics represents commitment to the principle which respects humanity and a person. So, philosophy is the love of wisdom and the pursuit of knowledge. So, ontology is the nature of reality. Metaphysics is the nature of the universe, and epistemology is the nature of knowledge. Axology is the nature of types and criteria, values, logics, and aesthetics. So, our code of ethics is the essential part of any profession claiming to be self-regulating. You'll have a box in 5.1 that's going to kind of cover that with all the codes of ethics. It's going to be like telling you what to do. Okay, so the AARC has a statement of ethics and professional conduct. So this conduct seeks to establish parameters and behavior for members of profession. So moral obligations impose ethical duties on therapists. So tools of cross-examination is cited in legal proceedings. Here's a little question that I usually ask the students, and it goes along with this little theory, so in principle. So professional obligations and patients' rights. So you have an obligation and your patients have rights too. So you're obligated to fulfill your duties, but your patients also have rights. So what do the ethical theories and principles provide the foundation for? So that's something to think about. So ethical theories and principles provide the foundation for all ethical behavior. So for all ethical behavior, that's going to be the theories and principles that are the foundation. So all of your behavior. So autonomy, patients' rights, basis for informed consent. So informed consent. What is informed consent, right? So that is the principle acknowledges patients' personal liberty and their right to decide their own course of treatment. They have the right to decide that. So under this principle, any use of deceit to get patient to reverse decision to refuse treatment is considered unethical. So we do not have we cannot force a patient to do anything, so we need to make sure that we are being ethical in that decision. Now, it's informed consent, right? So that's autonomy. So that's patients' rights. So we need to respect their wishes. So what is veracity? So it's the principle that binds healthcare provider and patient to be truthful. So problems with veracity center around issues with benevolent deception. But what is benevolent deception? Okay, so let's go back to veracity. Veracity. So we're gonna that's withholding truth from the patient for his or her own good. So sometimes you have to do that, right? We sometimes have to tell them or hold stuff. Do we or do we not? Okay, so being upfront and honest at all times about procedures. Okay, so benevolent deception, that's the truth is withheld from the patient for supposedly his or her own good. So for instance, when the doctor decides to withhold the truth from a conscious, well-oriented adult, the decision affects the interactions between the healthcare providers and the patients as a chilling effect on their rapport that is necessary for good care. So that could affect that whole deception with that patient. So benevolent deception. Non-maleficent principle obligates healthcare providers to avoid harming patient and to actively prevent harm when possible. So problems occur when treatment has serious side effects or double effect. So that double effect brings us to the essence of the definition of the word dilemma. So the word comes from the Greek term die. So die meaning two and lemma meaning assumptions or propositions. So um, beneficent, so raises do no harm. So do no harm. So it's a requirement to higher level. So requires healthcare workers to contribute to health and well-being of their patients. So dilemmas in this domain have led to development of advanced directives. So everybody should have an advanced directive. They don't when they come to the hospital. So like when you get asked that you have surgery, do you have an advanced directive? Well, no, I don't. But you can ask me and I'll tell you. So I don't have a living will at this point. Why most people our age do not. As you get older, you do. There's two types of advanced directives. Living will states a patient's health care preference in writing. There's a durable power of attorney for health care, allows the patient to identify another person to carry out his or her wishes with respect to health care. Your confidentiality requires health care workers to respect patients' rights to privacy. That goes into that HIPAA part of it, okay? It respects the secrets which are confided even after the patient has died. So even after they die, you're still under that contract, okay? Um, Patient info should be discussed only in private and with persons who have legitimate reason and need to know. So trading gossip about a patient is unprofessional, unethical, and in certain cases illegal. So qualified rather than absolute ethical principles. So in certain situations, healthcare workers are permitted to share patients' medical history with others. So yeah, I would have to, if I had a patient and I might have to share some medical information with somebody else because obviously we're sharing care. So I might have to share medical information with an x-ray tech or with another nurse or a surgeon or whoever, a house supervisor, because we have to communicate. Okay, so risk of inadvertent disclosures of protected health information, which is PHI, protected health information. So has increased exponentially with advert of social networking sites. So that is because why? Because people are posting pictures of patients or their patients or putting information about what happened that day in the ER, and they're not supposed to. Okay, even little hints. If you live in small towns, people can figure these out. So justice. It involves fair distribution of care. Balance must be found between healthcare expenses and ability to pay. Rationing of healthcare services calls for distributive justice. Compensatory justice calls for recovery of damages incurred from medical malpractice. And compensatory justice, less than 2% of healthcare costs are related to medical malpractice or negligence lawsuits, and your cost represents little, if any, impact on cost of healthcare. Role duty, that's when practitioners have duty to understand limits of role and to practice with fidelity. And RTs must not perform duties outside of defined role, because no single individual can be solely responsible for providing all of patients' healthcare needs. Modern healthcare is necessarily a team effort. Ethical viewpoints and decision making. So you have formalism. Viewpoint relies on rules and principles, and rules function apart from consequences of a particular act. So you act is justifiable if it applies rules or principles. And consequentialism, they have an act which is judged to be right or wrong based on consequences, and commonly uses principle of utility, which aims to promote greatest general good. And then ethical viewpoints and decision making. Okay, so when we look at this, you have a mixed approach, which are to moral reasoning. You try to capitalize on strengths of formalism and consequentialism. So the principle of utility, which is rule utilitarianism approach. So what is that? So it's a variation of consequentialism. Okay, so the question is not which act has the greatest utility, but which rule would promote the greatest good if it were generally followed. Okay, so we need to be concerned with which rule would promote greatest good instead of which act. And so what disadvantage, what is this? So variability between caregivers. So different people think different things, right? So you get a different variable or viewpoint in decision making. So differences in values, education levels, because obviously the more educated you are, or the different levels, you're going to think differently. Risk of inconsistent ethical decision making, especially if you have different people. Some people are not as ethical. So virtue ethics allows established practices of profession to give guidance. So we want to ask, how should I carry out my life if I am to live well? It calls for behavior based on what good practitioners would do in similar circumstances. It's founded not in rules or consequences, but in personal attributes of character or virtue. And then you have intuitionism. So ethical viewpoints hold there are certain self-evident truths, usually based on moral maxims. So we need to treat others fairly. So when decision-making tools is unhelpful in certain situations, it will depend on intuition, intuitional abilities of any specific caregiver. Oops, sorry. So in this box, you'll have it. I'm sorry, it's probably in a different chapter. I'm not sure. Oh, it's in this chapter. Okay. Comprehensive decision-making model. So you want to identify your problem or use. You want to identify individuals involved, identify the ethical principles or the principles that apply, identify who should make the decision, identify their role of the practitioner, consider the alternatives. You have long-term and short-term consequences. Make the decision, including the decision not to act, and follow the decision to observe its consequences. So this model that combines the best elements of formalism, consequentialism, and virtue ethics. So you want to never to attempt to make ethical decisions for others. You can only make decisions for yourself. Right. You need to make your own decisions. So legal issues affecting respiratory care. So you have systems of law. So public law, there's two major divisions. So criminal law deals with acts against welfare and safety of public. Administrative law consists of regulations set by government agencies. So if you have criminal law and administrative law, public law deals with relationships and private parties of government. So systems law You have civil law, which protects citizens from others who might seek to take an unfair advantage. And civil courts decide if plaintiff has been wronged and a degree of reparation is required. Now, tort law, it's a civil wrong. Stretching out my. It's a civil wrong committed against individuals or property for which court provides remedy. And the basic functions of courts are to keep the peace between individuals, to substitute a compensatory remedy for personal injury instead of allowing individuals to seek vengeance. There's three basic forms of torts. You have negligent or intentional torts. You won't really need to know much of this, but you do need to know why or what you could be sued for as a therapist or any type of medical person. I learned these in business law class, but torts are very important because you can be sued for being negligent. So you have negligent, intentional, and where's my third one? Okay, so on the next one. Okay, so torts in which liability is assessed regardless of fault, as in the case of manufacturers of defective products. Intentional tort involves willful act violating another interest. Negligent tort is failure to perform one's duties competently. So then you have causation, which revolves around whether acts of negligence were caused in fact and legal cause of damages. So proximative causation or legal causation, it turns on foreseen ability. So it determines fairness to impose damages on defendant. It tends to be retrospective analysis. And damages is another factor in negligence lawsuits. So they can get you for damages. And there's three types. So you can have economic, non-economic damages, and punitive damages. So economic is awarded for economic loss. Non-economic damages is pain, suffering, disability, disfigurement, and loss of enjoyment of life. And they can get you for punitive damages, which is awarded to punish wrongful conduct, indeed or future unlawful conduct. Elements of negligence is a practitioner owes a duty to the patient. The practitioner breaches that duty. The breach of duty was the cause of damages. Damage or harm came to the patient. And there's three classifications of malpractice. So clinical malpractice, which is assault and battery. You have civil, which is negligence. And then you have ethical malpractice, which is violations of professional ethics and possibly resulting in censure. And there's two defenses against intentional torts, which is no intent to do harm. And intentional torts is a wrong perpetrated by someone who tends to do the act and possibly intends to do the harm. A patient gave consent to action, knowing risk involved. So avoiding lawsuits, that's a great thing. We need to do what we're supposed to be doing, right? We don't want those. Be aware of and conform to all legal aspects of licensure and standards of care. So institutional risk management processes should be an ongoing component of the hospital operation and professional development. So you will get professional development from the hospital consistently. They send you these. They'll tell you at your hospital or send you emails through your email. And your director will tell you you have to do these. You got so many days, and you do them on your time off, or you do them when you have some dead time, and they will keep you up to date on the law. So every therapist should have malpractice insurance. You should. Active risk management practices and appropriate guest relation policies. Two most effective tools in preventing malpractice litigation. HIPAA. So HIPAA is very important. We talk about it constantly. So HIPAA is Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act of 1996. It was a congressional act in 1996 to establish standards for privacy of individually identifiable health information. Our basic goal of ACT was to strike balance between protecting individuals' health information and not impeding exchange of information needed to provide quality health care. So medical supervision. So you have RTs require by scope of practice to work under competent medical supervision. So that means that you need to have a doctor or physician. So the physician assumes responsibility for the wrongful actions of the RT. Okay, so you're working under a doctor. So you have a medical director. We even have a medical director here at the college who is over us. And then you have it comes down. Okay, so there's a medical director, then you have me, and then you have the clinical director, and so forth. Well, we also have, we have our dean. So for the wrongful actions of the RT, as long as such negligence occurred in the course of the employer-employee relationship, the act must be within the scope of the employment. You have to do what's within your scope of practice. You are not supposed to be, you shouldn't be giving shots or morphine shots or Dilaudid shots to a patient. That's not in your scope of practice. The injury caused must be the result of an act of negligence. So RT employers, either physician or hospital is liable for the RT action. So in some states, supervising physician may still be liable even if the therapist is employed by the hospital. So legal theory of failure to supervise. So we're going to call that respondent superior. So let the master answer. So the master will answer for you. Professional licensure issues. You have every RT should know in detail Respiratory Care Practice Act, so licensure statute. Their therapist-driven protocols. We go in detail with that here. Once you get into the program, you wouldn't really understand them at this point, but you will. Therapists permitted to exercise independent judgment. Those what they are. They give you the right to make your own decisions based on protocols. Therapists permitted to exercise independent judgment. Like I just said, decision making will be more frequently called into question in court. Understanding causes of discipline, including substance abuse, domestic violence, sexual abuse, and gross incompetence. Interaction of ethics and law, corporate compliance officer. So there is one usually within the hospital, overseeing hospitals' business practices and ensures conformity to the law, available to discuss legal or ethical issues arising in course of care. Then you have a Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act that happened back in the Obama years, right? Passed by Congress in 2010. We are still waiting to see what happens with that. Nothing has changed. Improves whistleblower protections for hospital workers. National Labor Relations Act, that's an NLRA, provides protection to hospital workers even if they do not belong to a union. So it protects workers when he or she engages in an act that would benefit all employees. So for an example, because we're not talking back, RTs ask the supervisor to increase shift differential. So shift differential, if you do not know, so for instance, I'm working a day shift right now. I'd be at the hospital, and the next person that's coming on at 6 p.m. or 7 p.m., that person who works a night shift actually gets shift differential because they get paid an incentive to work at night. Okay, so they get paid $2, $3, $4 an hour to work nights. Okay, on top of what they're already making an hour. Even if they get called in, they'll get that extra whatever an hour. So that shift differential. Okay, so same thing. And on the weekends, they get paid extra. And then they get paid extra for the nights on the weekend. So there's advantages. So everybody gets paid extra on the weekends, days and nights. So that's what they're saying. So RT asks supervisor to increase shift differential for all RTs who work that shift. Okay. Or you could get, right now, they're asking, okay, well, I've already worked 7 days in a row and you're calling me in because we have more COVID patients. Well, I want to get double bonus. So they mean double bonus. They mean they want to get paid whatever the bonus is at that point. They want it twice. So that means maybe they're going to make $50, $60 an hour or something like that. So that's what they're asking for. False Claim Act forbids making false claims against government, provides severe sanctions against violators, including possible repayment up to 3 times amount if false claim made against government health plan, possible civil penalties, healthcare and change, rapidly changing relating to how services are funded and how patients and healthcare workers interact. So managed care affects the ethical decision-making process. Healthcare practitioners must consider not only the best services to deliver to the patient, but also best managed care outcome. So our specific considerations include, number one, factual premises and beliefs such as definition of death, legal concepts such as torts law, externally imposed mandates or expectations such as hospital accreditation standards, the best managed care outcome, all 50 healthcare advanced directives. So all 50 states and the District of Columbia have adopted some form of healthcare advanced directives. And 91, the Patient Self-Determination Act requires that all hospitals receive Medicaid and Medicare funds. Assertion whether patients have a wish to have advanced directives. So advanced directive instruments are states regulated. A couple of case studies I have on here for you guys. We can kind of go ahead and go to that. I really will not be able to actually really get into those. I don't think that you can see the answers, but they are on the actual regular slides. So we can kind of talk about them though, I guess. So we're going to talk about them. I guess that'd be better. So describe some information you might gather or consider before making a decision that involves ethics. For example, before discontinuing life support for a patient who is brain dead, what could you consider? So here's what you could do. Okay, so patients' rights and professional obligations must be considered first. So always, we're going to do that. Will the patient be harmed? Okay. And you can be more specific to extend, okay, family documentation. So you have to discuss with the family what's the advance directive, what is something that you have to do. We have to run certain tests to make sure we know he's brain dead. We've already done all that. We need to see about his advance directive, really is what we're going to have to do, and then consult with the family. So the healthcare is constantly changing and evolving in ways that affect ethical and legal decision making. Please discuss one example, such as managed care, and briefly explain how this new kind of medicine might shape our choices. So okay, so we have managed care now, and so if you go back to page 87, I believe it's around there, similar systems require decisions about who gets care resources and how much, which is really not all that great. Documentation in regard to truth-telling reimbursement and other issues. So it's really not shaping up to be all that great. So we need to really kind of think about a better way to do our healthcare system. I don't think our way we have our insurance situation working right now is really a fair way to look at it. It needs to be rethought. So that's kind of where we're at with that. So you get a chance to meet with your fellow students for lunch in the hospital cafeteria during a busy clinical day. One of your classmates is bursting with excitement as you sit down to eat. You won't believe what I got today. I was asking to take care of Mr. Brainley, a patient in the ICU, and he started to go bad. We had to intubate. Then he coded, and I got to go do CPR. It was so cool. So, number one, what's the problem with this picture? I just spoke about this with you guys. What violation has your classmate committed? Number one, what? A HIPAA violation, right? Confidentiality. It's both a legal and ethical issue. Discussion of cases of or patients should not be held in the cafeteria, elevators, or public places. Number one, you're in the cafeteria, okay? Everybody, that patient's family could be sitting right next to you, and they did not know that they even lost their family yet, or friends of that family. You have to be very carefully. First off, you said the patient's name. No good. We don't say the patient's name. Yes, you are eventually going to tell your friends. We will discuss that because we do talk about what you did that day. So, but we would never have said the patient's name. Don't say that. That's not ethical. We don't do that. Okay. So we don't, and we wouldn't come in there. I know you're going to be excited because for us, that's exciting, um, or so on. Okay. So, but for a family member, that's not really exciting. They don't want to be like, oh my God, my grandpa, he just coded and he had CPR. That's so scary. Think about if it's your grandpa. So you have to be considerate where you're at and how you're approaching that situation. So what are the possible consequences of the scenario? Probably just student could be reprimanded, right? We could write you up. You could be asked to leave the program for confidentiality. While the situation has a relatively low risk of harm, the ultimate consequences of breach of confidentiality, you could be actually brought into litigation by the family member over breach of confidentiality. That actually is a bad thing, okay? It provides opportunity for discussion of how to deal with confidentiality issues. One simple response would be to remind the classmate about talking about patients in the cafeteria. Is this situation simply a breach of ethics or a violation of law? Due to confidentiality laws, this could be considered a violation, so it's both. Okay. You receive an order to administer a breathing treatment, a bronchodilator, to a 27-year-old asthma patient. The patient refuses the therapy, stating, "I just can't take it any more of those today." So they've had plenty of them. He appears to be alert and oriented. Does this patient have a legal right to refuse in this case? Cite evidence from the text to justify your answer. Of course he has. He has a right because he is coherent. He's 27. He can just say no, right? So according to the Hospital Bill of Rights, he reaffirms the patient right to refuse treatment. Forcing or threatening could be illegal. You cannot threaten them. How would you respond to this situation? How would you react to this patient? You need to be calm, collected always, and it's always be too good to be um, reassuring to this patient and just allowing them to understand why they need it, and explain. Just be calm and say, hey, okay, well, I'll come back and check on you in about an hour. Maybe you want to take it then. What are other actions that should you take at this time? Refusal to the treatment must be documented. You can put it in the medical record. It might be important to discuss with the nurse or the physician and pass the information. You need to tell your instructor, obviously, and the person, the RT who actually has that patient. I'm going to move on from these. Y'all can look these up if you would like to when you are reading through the slides. And okay, so you guys, if y'all have any more questions, you know where to find me. I'm going to post these. And I will see you soon and good luck.